James Snapp's book on the longer ending of Mark is the most thorough look onto the textual variant of Mark 16, 9 through 20 I have ever seen. Snapp dives into all the textual evidence from the external manuscripts themselves to the early church fathers, and he even proposes theories onto why the longer ending was left off of a couple of manuscripts from Egypt. Going into this book, I planned on disagreeing with James Snapp on every turn in the book. I knew from my professors and my favorite commentators that the evidence against the larger ending of Mark was overwhelming and even insurmountable. So I went in expecting James Snapp's book, Authentic, The Case for Mark 16, 9 through 20, to be a juvenile book that basically did nothing more than count the total number of manuscripts and then claim, well, Mark 16, 9 through 20 is in the most Greek manuscripts, so it must be the correct reading. There is nothing juvenile, naive, or simplistic in James Snapp's work. This book is not fodder for King James only supporters. As a matter of fact, Snapp's attention to detail makes the other arguments I have heard or read in the past against the longer ending of Mark sound uninformed and naive. Snapp begins his book by presenting the scholarly consensus against the longer ending of Mark, along with the evidence that they put forward. He then proceeds to examine that evidence step by step and to prove that the evidence against the longer ending of Mark is really, it's paper thin. It's built on only a couple of manuscripts and a biased view of the text itself. My favorite section of the book is tough to nail down because I found so much of it to be revealing, even shocking at times as to how much I was misled. But I think my favorite part was when he tore apart the theory that Mark 16, 9 through 20 is nothing more than a compilation of the ending of Matthew, Luke, John, and Acts, and must have been put together by some copyist in the late 1st century, sometime in the early 2nd century, and then tacked that onto the Gospel of Mark after Mark 16, 8. But once one examines the longer ending of Mark against the other resurrection accounts, it becomes very apparent that Mark is an independent creation describing the resurrection of Jesus Christ. I also found Snapp's examination of the vocabulary of Mark 16, 9 through 20 to be eye-opening as well. I was told that the internal evidence of these verses clearly proved that Mark did not write the longer ending of the gospel. I was told that the vocabulary of the longer ending pointed to an unknown author. But then Snapp examines the evidence and it's clear that that's a fabrication as well. Which then leads me to my favorite quote in the book. Dan Wallace's approach is typical. He claimed that the internal evidence is devastating, but he did not present the details of this devastating evidence. The difference in vocabulary it is claimed is devastating, but this cannot be true, since Mark 15:40 through 16:4 contains more once-used words than do verses 9 through 20, a point which many commentators seem strangely determined to avoid mentioning. And this is why I love Snapp's book so much. This is such a great read because he takes all those claims that are made by other scholars that, if I'm honest, I respect these scholars. I love these scholars. I listen to their work. That's why I always assumed that they were telling me facts. But then Snapp examines their claim and shows again and again that the details don't back up the arguments against the longer ending of Mark. So if you want to know what is the most likely ending for the Gospel of Mark, please don't take the experts at their words. Examine the evidence for yourself, and no one has more thoroughly gathered together all of the evidence relating to Mark 16, 9 through 20 than James Snapp. So I would recommend this book to anyone who loves the Gospels, specifically anybody who loves the Gospel of Mark in particular. And if you have an interest in New Testament textual criticism, and every single pastor You owe it to yourself to read James Snapp's book on the longer ending of the Gospel of Mark. In my eyes, this is a must read. If you enjoyed this review and you would like to stay engaged in the wonderful world of Christian literature, I'd encourage you to subscribe to my channel to get more Rev Reads reviews.